Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Clean Energy for All Table's legislative recap for the year 2021. This is the first legislative recap that the Clean Energy for All table has put together, and we're really excited to go over some of the bills which passed, the bills which didn't pass, and just the general what happened during this year's very packed and very dismal legislative session. So providing a little bit of background first, the Clean Energy for All table is a network of local representatives of organizations, organizers, volunteers, uh, policy experts, lawyers, and just everybody involved in the clean energy space that come together to try and articulate and push for a path for a just transition to clean and renewable energy within the state of Florida. We're extremely committed to principles of environmental justice and community autonomy. We believe that the necessity to transition to clean energy in the state of Florida is obvious. Florida has more to lose than anybody from the runaway effects of climate change. But as we transition to a clean and renewable energy source, we at the CEFA table recognize that the burden of transitioning can't be placed upon the people who are most vulnerable and who have the least contribution to the climate change, the greenhouse gas crisis that we're facing. In addition, we're committed to a goal of a transition that empowers people, that breaks down historic mechanisms of oppression, and that creates a better future for all Floridians. And so we've got many members of the CEFA table. We meet every 2 weeks on Fridays at 11 a.m. Anybody who's interested in participating, in joining, hearing what we have to say, strategizing with us, and being part of the Clean Energy for All table and the movement for a just transition in this state is welcome to join. And we'll have information for how you can do so towards the end. But without further ado, we wanted to start off with a little bit of a background of this year's legislative session. So in this past election, Democrats lost a few seats. In 2018, there was a lot of buzz about Democrats picking up seats in the Florida House and the Florida Senate. However, basically all those victories were reversed in the 2020 elections, leaving us with a split between the Florida House, in which there are 78 Republicans and 42 Democrats, and the Florida Senate, 24 Republicans and 16 Democrats. This leaves the Democratic Party with very little in the way of strong, significant influence over which bills get passed, and it's going to leave us vulnerable to redistricting as well. But really, the effects of this sort of change has been pretty clear to see just in the bills we're going to talk about in the all the nasty bills that did get passed this year without Democrats having the opposition party having too much opportunity to stand up or stop them. One of the more egregious things we saw is losing one senator, Jose Javier Rodriguez, who was one of the strongest climate champions we had in a election that was rife with fraud and one of the masterminds of which is now being has been arrested and is facing trial for election fraud. And so the general outlook in terms of the party composition, not super great this year in terms of advocacy for clean energy policy, climate policy, and environmental justice policy. But in addition to that, there were a lot of consideration and changes made to the rules of how session operates and who is able to offer comment due to the result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll pass it off to Jonathan Weber of Florida Conservation Voters to talk about a few of those changes and how they made it more difficult for people to offer comment this year.
Thank you, Zach. Again, my name is Jonathan Weber. I'm the Deputy Director of Florida Conservation Voters, and I'm so delighted to be here tonight with all of our friends and allies and partners with the Clean Energy for All table. This is a great event, so thank you so much for allowing me to play a small part of it. But you are exactly right, Zach. I mean, this year was kind of a wild, radical change from how the public can interact with their legislature because of the COVID-19 restrictions. Two quick examples. Number one, in the Florida Senate, all meetings were moved off campus, so off the Capitol grounds, and they were moved to the Civic Center here in Tallahassee, which is located a few blocks down the road. And if you wanted to participate, you had to comment through a closed circuit television to the committee chambers, which was still where the senators would actually meet physically. So we were separated by a few blocks, right, if we wanted to communicate with legislators. Also, the entire Senate office building was entirely shut down. So if you wanted to go have a meeting with a legislator, that was physically impossible. It was impossible to get through the door. Every single door to the building had a guard at it or a representative where you had to show your credentials in order to get into the building. So face-to-face meetings, the regular kind of pop-in meetings that happen all the time, none of those happened on the Senate side at all. So it was really, really challenging for advocates like all of us on this call to inform and update legislators on what's going on, what our point of view was, how a certain bill would impact a certain community or whatever it might be. So it was really, really difficult on the Senate side. On the House side, it was a little bit even more difficult in some ways. So what they did there was that they limited all public testimony. So if you wanted to speak, what you had to do was fill out an online form and make sure you did it at a minimum of 3 hours ahead of time. If you were 1 minute late, the system shut down and they wouldn't allow any more people to add their names to be able to testify in person. And they also limited the amount of people that were allowed in each committee room, which made it extremely difficult for lots of people to gather and to actually look legislators in the eye when they cast some of these really difficult votes. One thing I did bring with me was my collection of hall passes that everyone who worked in the process this year has, because in order to even get into the Capitol building, you needed a hall pass, which was based on when you signed up for your meeting, and you can only get into the building, into the committee room if you had your right hall pass. So it made it really difficult this year to do anything. There was none of the just walking around the building and finding the right legislator, finding the right staff person in order to get to influence policy in the best possible way. So I just wanted, you're totally right for highlighting this, Zach. It made it extremely difficult for us as advocates, and even more importantly, for the public to be able to participate in this process in any kind of meaningful way. If you missed your chance to participate in testimony, their answer was just send an email. Send an email to the general inbox, which is like a perfectly fine way to communicate, but not if you have some really important information that needs to get in prior to a vote. It made it next to impossible to get this done. So really disappointing year. And I feel like there could have been much better ways to do this. Certainly Florida has the money and the technology to figure this out for the third largest state in the country.
Agreed, John. And so let's get into a conversation now on exactly, how the legislative session shaped out and what the impacts of these more difficult circumstances for offering comment and the electoral shifts have had. We're going to start off with an overview of the bills which passed, the bills which didn't pass, and their implications. Then we're going to get into a conversation on the budget priorities, which were funded and how they were funded. And then we'll highlight some of the major legislative champions who scored victories for us and showed strong commitment to climate justice in one of the most difficult places, environments for it imaginable. Then finally, we're going to close out with a discussion of what the next steps are for public advocacy and organizing for a just transition to clean renewable energy. So, that being said, move forward to the first bill.
Hi, good afternoon. Maria Rebellas from Chispa here. Well, one of the first bills that sadly didn't pass was a bill that we advocate for, and we were in full support. I believe that I speak for everyone in this call, was the utility customer relief. That was a bill by Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith from Orlando and Senator Shevrin Jones from Miami Gardens. They presented HB 1435 and SB 1860, and the bill addressed Florida current utility debt and disconnection crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And they were trying to provide $100 million in direct relief for struggling energy and water utility customers. That bill will have offered critical financial assistance to families through the elimination of utility debt since the onset of the pandemic in March 2020. The bill also will have prevented all disconnections of public services by participating in utility companies, and until economic and public health conditions will have improved. And it will have eliminated reconnection fees and support the reconnection of utilities for those who had their power cut off by the utilities, by participating utilities. And they also require participating utilities to commit to applying best practices when setting up delinquent bill payment plans. And this bill will have directly benefited our communities. Florida's largest utility companies have cut power to more than 610,000 homes since August, all in the midst of all the struggles that families are experiencing during the pandemic. And data released a few weeks ago by 6 major utilities, Duke, Florida Power & Light, Florida City Gas, Gulf Power, Chico, and People Gas, show that the companies turn off electricity to 88,402 Florida families during the month of February. If it had passed, HB 1435, that was SB 1860, will have brought immediate relief to those families in need. Of the over 610,000 households disconnected, approximately 10% were not reconnected, leaving a cumulative of 60,000 households stuck in the dark. It is alarming that during the coldest and the hottest seasons of the year, Florida's largest utilities focus more on their profits than on the well-being of families experiencing financial difficulties caused by a global crisis. Everyone has been forced to make huge sacrifices to overcome the pandemic, except the big public service companies. While many families, when due utility outage, may have had the power restored at some point during the month of disconnections, thousands remain without disconnecting. In February alone, the big six utilities failed to restore power for 6,723 families, leaving thousands of Floridians without power until the end of the month. Chispa is extremely concerned because power outages can be deadly for low-income families and vulnerable populations who are already facing deep inequalities due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that can easily lead to the fearsome cascading and multiplier effects of domestic violence, isolation for children and the elderly in homes, and other safety concerns. 46% of Florida households struggle to pay monthly household expenses, and our electric bills are among the highest in the country. There is a critical need for relief and avoid disconnections, especially for low-income families. However, the Florida legislature refused to help working families by not passing this bill.
Really disappointing. The next bill we're going to talk about are the solar and schools bills, which failed to get even any hearings. And so I pass it on to Heaven from Solar United Neighbors, as well as Gianna from the Clio Institute.
Hi, thank you. I'm Heaven Campbell. I'm the Florida Program Director of Solar United Neighbors. This year, we started a campaign to open access to solar energy in Florida via a mechanism, billing mechanism called power purchase agreements. 80% of all of the solarized schools in the nation use power purchase agreements, this third-party agreement, in order to go solar. It's very common, it's tried and true. We are one of just a handful of states that do not allow this type of financing arrangement. This year, West Virginia became the newest state to legalize power purchase agreements, putting us in an even smaller minority of 6 states that do not allow these, and even fewer that explicitly bar them through our statutes. So this year, like many other sessions, we saw an effort to legalize these in some form, and the clean energy community really rallied behind this, and we were able to form a coalition of support for legalizing power purchase agreements, and really trying to expand solar access for schools. So there were a few bills that would have done this to some degree. The first was Senate Bill 188 and House Bill 551, and this is really just the lowest ask possible. This was an ask to not include solar in a penalizing fashion in the per student spending cap, and basically allow schools the option of going solar, not even through a PPA, just on their own, and not being penalized for it through budgetary barriers, if you will. Unfortunately, this did not pass, it did not move. So it had very minor attention given to it, but nothing serious, and made no serious headway. And again, that was just the lowest of asks. Just don't penalize us for going solar and using this option in the Sunshine State to save money for our schools. And around the nation, we're seeing schools take money that they save via going solar and reinvest it in students, in infrastructure, and in teacher salaries. The biggest ask here was Senate Bill 1718 and House Bill 1611. Those would have not only legalized power purchase agreements for schools, but also other vulnerable organizations like nonprofits, including churches and municipalities, city governments. That did not move whatsoever. And that was a big ask, but we had broad support for that. And then some even more surprising, there was a Republican-backed push to legalize power purchase agreements just for commercial entities, Senate Bill 208. That did pass through regulated industries, one committee, but again, no significant movement there. And that's important because this is an extremely popular financing mechanism for solar for commercial entities that we want to be operating and expanding in our state. Big box retailers like Walmart and Target have made clean energy commitments and utilize power purchase agreements to install solar. So focusing again back on schools, our state stands to save conservatively $148 million per year by helping schools go solar. Each school district could easily save $2 million a year, and that's per year. And think of what $2 million could do for our aging infrastructure that schools are facing, as well as teacher salaries that we're trying to retain highly qualified teachers. And on a school level, that's an average of $40,000 per year, just offsetting a third of their energy. So if they were to choose to offset more, then even more savings. So we have so much to gain from moving this forward. And not only was it not passed, it was really given very little credence this year. And this stings because we are the Sunshine State and only 3% of our energy is from solar, the overwhelming majority of that percentage being utility scale solar. So I'm going to hand it over to Gianna with the Clio Institute to talk more about their effort to solarize schools.
Thank you so much, Heaven. I'm so happy to be here with you all. I'm going to be brief. I think Heaven covered a really great amount of it, gave some great information. There was one more set of solar bills. It was a bipartisan effort. Again, a really easy ask. Basically, just start a pilot program, fund it through the Department of Education, and this can only target 3 school districts. We tried to make it, as pretty simple as possible in order to expand solar on some of Florida's public schools in those 3 targeted districts. And we know that 97% of Florida public schools are used as state emergency shelters. So this is so important when it comes to hurricanes. As we know, hurricane season is about to kick off here in Florida, and a lot of community members rely on these shelters when disasters strike. And in order to make our buildings as resilient as possible, sometimes we need to rely on more than one energy source. So if we could have had solar plus battery storage on these schools, which right now only about 100 public schools in Florida have solar, we could have not only saved money and put that money back into local budgets, who we know are hurting right now because of the pandemic. We could have saved some money. We could have built more resilient infrastructure. Unfortunately, this bipartisan effort could not even get one committee hearing. So we've got some really easy asks here, some proposals that would really benefit not only local governments, but students and teachers, and help us create that resilient infrastructure. And unfortunately, it was not able to be moved. So with that being said, I will pass it on back to Zach. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John and Heaven. The next bill we're going to talk about, which didn't pass, didn't even receive any hearings, is the moving the state to renewable energy, the Renewable Portfolio Standards Bill. And I'll pass it on to Kim Ross and Susan Glickman to talk about that.
Thanks, Zach. This is Kim Ross from Rethink Energy Florida. So we just saw that only 3% of the state is run on solar. And yet we know, scientists know, that we have got to shift very quickly as a state, as a nation, as a world, off of fossil fuels and onto renewable energies in order to slow down climate change and keep this world a livable place. And so this bill would have played a huge role toward that. So first, it would have prohibited new oil and gas drilling or exploration. It tightened the definition of renewable energy. But the big thing is it would have had 100% of the state's energy use to come, that's the state government, to come from renewables by 2040 and a net zero for the state of Florida by 2050. It directed the state's Department of Energy to develop a transition plan, and it created a renewable energy workforce development advisory committee to help ensure that there's a just transition for those that are employed in fossil fuels, among many other things. So there's a lot of jobs that stand to benefit and be created as a result of renewable energy. And so if you'll click one more time, you will also see that just like all the other ones we've talked about, this set of bills did not move at all. In fact, we'll get into the preemption bills in just a little bit, but a lot of times they were like, well, we need to create we need to create an energy plan at the state level. And we're like, well, there's one right here, House Bill 283 and Senate Bill 720. And I'll just mention the sponsors and then we'll bring up Susan Glickman. The House Bill 283 was sponsored by Representative Escamani, and Senate Bill 720 was sponsored by Senator Berman. So we appreciate them putting this good bill out, but unfortunately it did not move. Susan?
Great, thanks, Kim. I'm Susan Glickman. I'm the Florida Director of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I'm just going to add to what my friend Kim Ross had to say. My own state senator, Senator Jeff Brandis from Pinellas County, had a bill, Senate Bill 136, which would have created a task force to really sort of address developing a plan for the state of Florida, because as you can tell, we're way far behind. And even that bill that was sponsored by a Republican, seasoned Republican state senator didn't get a hearing. And it's a bill that has been filed over multiple years. Often a bill, particularly that is charting new territory, takes more than one session to pass. But at the same time, if there's a bill that's been filed multiple years and has never got a hearing, it's a pretty good guess that it's not moving forward. So you can see that our state and the leadership of the Florida legislature, which is Zach so ably described, is pretty situated in one political party, and all the political power is very concentrated, has decided not to address the issue of moving to clean energy in a state that's as vulnerable as Florida is. So I think we made the point that there were lots of opportunities for clean energy bills that did not pass. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Zach, to move on to the next section.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think our failure to push this bill forward keeps us in a very sad minority of states. We're one of only 12 states in the union with no renewable energy goals whatsoever, which is pretty pathetic if you think about how much Florida has, at risk, and the fact that we are the Sunshine State. Next, we're going to talk about the Resilient Florida Bill. This is sort of a transition between the good bills that didn't pass and the bad bills which did pass, because bill provides some really great new opportunities, however, with a lot of caveats. And I'm going to pass it on to Salome Garcia from Clio Institute, as well as Elizabeth Mathis from Florida Rising, to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Resilient Florida Bill.
Thank you so much, Zach. Hi, everyone. Salome Garcia here with the Clio Institute. And so, although we had so much incredible legislation that did not move, we did see some progress. We have seen now for years that Florida state legislature and leadership did not acknowledge climate change, refused to address the very real impacts that community residents were facing all over the state because of warming temperatures and sea level rise. And throughout now decades, really, and especially throughout the past couple of years, we've seen thousands and even millions of Florida residents demand climate action. And the organizations on this call and hundreds of others have made it impossible for anybody to run for governor of the state of Florida or to get leadership in the state of Florida without recognizing the need to mitigate the impact of the climate crisis. So we see Governor DeSantis, not only in his campaign trail, but throughout the past year, discuss climate change and discussing leadership's desire to address climate change. And so I want to be really clear, everybody on this call, the organizations, many listening will already know that there are two big themes to addressing the climate crisis. We need to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions, which are the root of the problem. And we also need to adapt to the impacts that residents are facing every single day. And the governor and Speaker Sprouse and Senate President Simpson did make a huge step in addressing the sea level rise and flooding issues that community residents are being faced with. So the governor's recommendation includes $100 million annually for resiliency projects. And Speaker Sprouse released what Resilience Florida, or also dubbed the Always Ready Bill package, includes. This includes statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan. And it incorporates a series of grant programs to be able to enable local municipalities and local regions to be able to invest in needed infrastructure to address that flooding that we see all over Florida, not only in coastal communities. We also see the Florida Hub for Applied Research and Innovation. We see a push towards regional resilience coalitions and leadership saying that they're encouraging regional resilience coalitions for intergovernmental solutions to mitigate the impacts of flooding and sea level rise. These are all, as you can very clearly see on the screen, a lot of really great buzzwords. Right now, we are faced with the incredible opportunity to continue to push that these words actually mean what we need them to mean, which is actionable accountability for low income and frontline residents to really be given the tools and the resources that they need in order to be able to survive the impacts of the climate crisis that we're already seeing. We also saw some accompanying legislation for how this is going to be funded, including Senate Bill 1954, which is the statewide flooding and sea level rise resiliency bill. It basically just details the Florida grant program. This did pass unanimously in the House and Senate. And again, what does this mean? This means that we are making it impossible for legislators to ignore the problems of the climate crisis. This is really a testament to how powerful our movement is. And even though this is kind of vague and wonky language, and we don't really know exactly what it's going to translate to, it provides us an opportunity to really hold our elected officials accountable and work with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and with the other departments that are going to implement these programs to making sure that we're really putting our money where our mouth is. So as I mentioned, and as Zach mentioned, even though this is a great step in the right direction, there's still a lot of gaps with this language. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Mathis and Gianna to talk a little bit about what those gaps are.
Thanks, Salo. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Mathis, and I work with Florida Rising and Central Florida Climate Action. As a climate justice organizer that specializes in resilience, I want to say that resilience is vital to an equitable future for Florida. However, resilience at the expense of affordable housing isn't actually resilience. Resilience requires economic stability in our most vulnerable communities, and that must be built on a solid foundation of safe and affordable housing. By passing HB 5401 and SB 2512, they permanently cut the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund by more than 50%, down to $200 million statewide annually, in order to fund the Resilient Florida Trust Fund and Water Protection and Sustainability Program Trust Funds. So the Florida legislature has put vulnerable communities at higher risk, especially while hurricane season is quickly approaching, as was previously mentioned. This greenwash attempt to fracture the conservation and housing justice communities has failed. We stood shoulder to shoulder in opposition to this proposal. The legislature could have used available federal funds from the American Rescue Plan, totaling up to $3.5 billion, in order to fund resilience and wastewater treatment efforts, but they chose to put that money into reserve for unspecified future use. Currently, more than 20% of Florida's nearly 3 million renters are at risk for eviction. By unnecessarily and permanently gutting affordable housing during a global pandemic, after over a decade of cuts to this critical fund, the Florida legislature has made our highest risk communities even more vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for putting that in perspective. I'm going to briefly touch on SB 1190, which is a climate resilience resolution. And as we've heard, it is a small step forward that the state is now finally recognizing sea level rise and flooding, but there are so many more climate and energy solutions that really need our attention. SB 1190 is a resolution that was filed by Senator Farmer. And this recognizes that flooding and sea level rise are caused by rising concentrations of global heat trapping gases as a result of human activity. And any solutions to the climate crisis must be all-encompassing and drafted alongside our frontline communities. And if allocating money focused only on property value and not the people are the only solutions, then we're going to continue to see more extreme weather events, public health crises, economic destabilization, and more. So urging our legislators to prioritize long-term energy and climate solutions is of the utmost importance. And this resolution is just a guide as to what that should look like. Unfortunately, it did not get any committee meeting hearings as most of the other legislation, but this is a great language to guide some of our legislators to when referencing what resiliency really should look like. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you so much. And then one of the final issues that many folks had with the Resilient Florida Plan 2514 is that it addresses only sea level rise and storm surge. But there's so many impacts associated with climate change, most notably heat stress. And so I'm going to pass on to Melissa Baldwin of Florida Clinicians for Climate Action to talk a little bit about the impacts that heat stress has on individuals and why it's important for us to address all of the impacts of climate change.
Hey everyone, I'm Melissa Baldwin. I'm the director of Florida Clinicians for Climate Action. We're a coalition of doctors and nurses who are concerned about climate health impacts, especially on vulnerable populations. I want to talk a little bit more about climate and health. Climate change is harming our health right now. Everyone is at risk, but certain people are more vulnerable than others. Pregnant women, infants and children, the elderly, communities of color, people without access to air conditioning, people who work outdoors, and people who have pre-existing conditions like heart and lung conditions, they're all more vulnerable to things like heat stress and heat stroke. Heat is the #1 weather-related killer. Extreme heat can trigger heart attacks, asthma attacks, it can cause problems with kidneys and diabetes, and heat exposure can also cause heat illness and heat stroke. So without prompt treatment, heat stroke can be deadly. There are thousands of families who live in Florida who don't have access to air conditioning, or even if they did, they can't afford to pay the bill. And so it's going to get hotter in Florida. It's hot now, but the projections are that the heat is going to increase. The Union of Concerned Scientists predicts the number of feels like 100 degrees days is going to double by mid-century and quadruple by the end of the century. If we do nothing to reduce heat trapping gases, this is only going to get worse. And this bill does nothing to reduce heat trapping gases. And it doesn't address the other big climate crisis, which is heat. So putting up a few seawalls is not going to protect low-income communities from killer heat. More needs to be done. So do not believe the greenwashing that is happening on this bill. It's a good step in the right direction, but it's not enough. It's not commensurate with the problem. In healthcare, we talk about treatment and prevention. And you heard one of the speakers earlier talk about adaptation and mitigation. With this bill may treat a few of the symptoms of climate change, but it does not get to the root cause. We need to have prevention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Next, we're going to talk about some of the really bad bills which passed this year. And there were a lot of really bad bills which passed this year. The united theme of this, the legislation which did pass, was an overall assault on democracy and resident input on the critical decisions which affect us, our lives, and our homes. There's some overlap, but the main themes were preemption bills aimed at shutting down local participation in the energy planning process, bills targeting the power and avenues for recourse of rural residents, particularly rural residents of color, and bills targeting democracy itself. And so without further ado, we're going to get into our first bad bill of this legislative session, House Bill 919. I'm going to kick it off to my colleague, Jonathan Weber.
Thank you so much, Zach. I'm glad to be back. So House Bill 919, which is the number that the bill actually passed by, this was something that we've all on this call have worked on so much over the past 3 months. So this is the Preemption on Restriction of Utility Services, sponsored by Senator Travis Hudson, Republican from Jacksonville, and Representative Josie Tomkow, Republican from Auburndale. This bill prohibits municipalities from restricting any fuel source that a utility or fuel provider may want to use or sell. Floridians are already some of the most disempowered citizens in the United States when it comes to energy issues. And this bill will cut off yet another avenue for public engagement and for citizens to have a say in how we power our homes and businesses. In Florida, we simply flip on the light switch and we get what we get. It seems our monopoly utilities and their allies in the Florida legislature want to keep it that way. This bill locks in a status quo that has failed to respond to the demands of our changing climate and has the potential to erase decades of local laws, safeguards, local taxes, and local clean energy commitments. Preemption bills are dangerous to begin with, and that's why, if they have to exist, they need to be extremely targeted and specific in their words. This bill is broad and vague and leaves so much to interpretation that there could be many legal challenges to exactly what the extent of the word restrict is, or another key phrase in the bill, may have the effect of restricting or prohibiting. Which of course, every legal challenge will come with extreme costs to local taxpayers. Many local communities are of course already overstrapped with funds. So where is this money going to come from? Great question. But the climate crisis is only getting worse, and Governor DeSantis and our legislative leaders have absolutely failed to offer any kind of plan, strategy, or goals on how to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So what this bill means is that, there's no leadership at the state level, and now no leadership allowed at the local level. Truly upsetting. Together, members of the seat at the table and more helped generate thousands of emails, tweets, and phone calls into the Florida legislature about this bill. I don't know for sure, but it's likely well over 100,000 individual contacts. Thankfully, there were some great moments on the floor of the House and Senate where members clearly listened to our concerns and spoke eloquently about how this bill will impact our future. I'll talk a little bit more about them later, but unfortunately, this bill did pass. It has not yet been signed into law by the governor. There is a strong veto campaign happening right now. If you're looking to participate in that, there are multiple ways to do so. We'll post them in the comments a little bit after this meeting, but hopefully the governor will veto this terrible bill. Thank you.
It's important to note that this is one of the terrible bills that isn't even homegrown. It's part of a national campaign by the natural gas industry, which put forward similar legislation in 22 other states. And you can see down there it was mostly passed on a party line vote with some exceptions. So the next bill we're going to talk about is House Bill 839. We'll have Susan Glickman from Southern Alliance for Clean Energy talk on that.
Great. And really picking up on the theme, there's an old phrase often in the legislature where they would profess that they do not want to pick winners and losers. But what happened at this session is exactly that. The Florida legislature was picking the expansion of gas infrastructure. This is often fracked gas that releases methane. Jonathan Weber was just speaking to that in House Bill 919. So now we have sort of a slightly different version of gas, which is petroleum, the kind of gas that we put in our cars. And I must note that from a climate change point of view, transportation sector has passed even the power sector for power plants in greenhouse gas emissions. So in the city of Tampa, we have a relative new mayor, Mayor Jane Castor. She's been in office about a year, and she got into office immediately promising to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to put the city of Tampa on a trajectory to get to 100% clean energy. And some of the kind of organizing around that and a number of allied organizations trying to push that along forward faster was putting an even a faster date on the transition to 100% clean energy. Well, that got some of what's known as the petroleum marketers, and those are people that have gas stations, usually gas stations with convenience stores, hence the words petroleum marketers concerned, and they put together a bill to stop local governments from banning gas stations. Now, that's not something that's happening anywhere in Florida, but they were concerned. The original version of House Bill 839 was even broader than that. It was really so broad and so vague that it could have been any kind of gas infrastructure, like if they wanted to put a pipeline in front of your front yard or frack for gas in your backyard. But that got narrowed down, and it was only banning gas stations. And that bill did pass. Again, no one's looking to ban gas stations. They also removed any kind of local control from any kind of requirement to have electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So that's really, the bill that passed. And again, it was in reaction to positive forward-moving activities in the city of Tampa. So that's House Bill 839. Zach, back to you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And the final bill we were going to talk about is Senate Bill 896, which is a really nasty bill that will remove local input over the siting of new solar, as well as incorporate biogas, renewable natural gas, into the state's definition of renewable energy. And so I'm going to pass it on to Connie Lee from the St. Peter St. Paul Community Council to talk a little bit about this bill.
It won't allow me to do my video, Zach.
Okay, great. Well, if you're just able to speak, that's well enough, I think.
Okay. Hi, I'm Connie Lee, and I want to talk about the solar part of Bill 896. I live in rural Archer, Florida, and I am a member of the St. Peter St. Paul Community Council. I'm one of the 3 founding members. Jerry Crawford and Michelle Rutledge and I started a community grassroots group to address an issue in our community. But Senate Bill 896 will allow solar power plants in unincorporated agricultural zones, like where my home is. I live in a residential farming neighborhood. We primarily have small farms here, but we are still a farming neighborhood. Senate Bill 896, there's a concern with Senate Bill 896, there is a concern for environmental injustice, particularly in marginalized communities like Black and Brown, low income, and rural communities. We encourage the governor to veto this bill, but and other pre-exempted bills, and because we want to be inclusive in the process of where facilities, and when we're talking about large industrial facilities that are placed in residential neighborhoods, we want to be included in the process. So what my group did last year in 2020, at the heat of the pandemic, global pandemic, we had to attend meetings. Some of us felt comfortable going to the in-person locations, but most of us did it on Zoom. The three things that we did: we want our voice to be heard, we want equity in the placement of facilities, and we also want environmental justice. So our group started in May with 3 people. We had a conference call meeting because of our rural area internet is not reliable, and we had 60 of our neighbors in that meeting. And from that meeting, we developed a steering committee to provide research for the quasi-judicial meetings that was coming up for this plant to be placed in our neighborhood. So we had to go to the zoning board. We had the opportunity to voice our opinion at the zoning board. And regardless of the decision of the zoning board, we also went to the Board of County Commissions here in Alachua County. Both boards had a decision to deny the special zoning petition 3-2, which that gave us an opportunity to have our voice heard. With this new bill, local residents would not have a voice in what's placed in their neighborhoods. The St. Peter, St. Paul Community Council, we are a historical African American community. We have, and approximately 300 plus homes will be surrounding the site. Some of the homes will have been less than 50 feet from property line to property line. We're talking about 600-acre site. We're talking about 250,000 panels. This new law allows even larger plants. I think it's 1,200 acres up to 500,000 panels. Okay, so because of the democratic process, we was allowed to, as a community, to speak at the planning board, and it was not just not in my backyard. We gave, we presented our research and voiced our concerns, and we prevailed. And thank God, in today's Senate, Senator Farmer was able to put an amendment to this bad bill so that our community will be excluded from the law. And less than 2 miles from our community, there's another proposed site. And what that amendment means, any site previous considered prior to July 1st, 2021 would not have the law applied to that site. However, the bad part is there are many other communities that do not have this protection. Like I said, 12,000 acres, 500,000 panels. It's a lot to put in a neighborhood, and you not have a voice in the process. Thank you. Now I turn it over to Jessica Lewis.
Thanks so much. Yeah, this bill 896 was originally meant to do one thing, which was to reclassify biogas as a renewable energy. Just to be clear, biogas, we do need to harvest it. We do need to have innovative technologies. Biogas comes from any type of waste, whether it's agriculture, human, plant waste, whatever it is. And the gas that is produced by that natural process of decomposition, we can harvest it and use it as energy. We can and should do that. However, classifying that biogas as renewable energy is now going to allow utility level corporations to count biogas as a renewable energy. It's going to allow them to do cost recovery on that. It's going to further tie ratepayers, everyday people like us, into a fossil fuel future. So we can and should pursue biogas because it is something that's already there and we can take advantage of it, but we should not pretend that it is a clean or renewable energy because it is not. So I want to be clear, this bill really did two big greenwashing things. It classified biogas, which is methane, as a supposedly renewable energy. And it says that local communities should not have control over siting of industrial level solar power plants. This is a greenwashing bill to a T. It is not a good one. We do want solar, but not at the expense of Floridians. We do need to use biogas, but not at the expense of ratepayers having to pay corporations to do that. So that's that in a nutshell.
Well said, Jessica and Connie. And this bill is being passed at really critical time for it as well. Like there are many environmental considerations that one has to take into consideration with the siting of the solar plant, from the presence of endangered species on or around the land to the social considerations of who is living in that community. And our utilities have announced plans to develop thousands of more megawatts of solar within the next few years, with upwards of 50 additional facilities that have to get sited somewhere. And so this bill is passed right in the nick of time to really isolate and keep local residents out of the planning process for where those facilities are going to go, right as that infrastructure is coming online. Next, we're going to talk about some of the major assaults that we saw on our democracy itself and the capacity of local residents and the people of Florida to have a say over what their government does and what kind of state they live in. And so I'm going to pass it on to Jonathan and then back to Jessica really quickly.
Thank you so much, Zach. And really, this has been such a wonderful presentation so far. So I'm just admire all of you who've spoken so far. So thank you. So a core part of the Clean Energy for All movement is good government, meaning open and easy access to vote for all eligible citizens, a commitment to transparency, the ardent protection of our basic freedoms as Americans, like the right to protest and petition our government for redress of grievances. I mean, all these things and more are core to good governance. Unfortunately, the Florida legislature passed bills this year that would impact all of these basic needs for the functioning of our constitutional republic. The Clean Energy for All Coalition was disappointed to learn and watch for the passage of House Bill 1, Governor DeSantis' anti-protest and censorship bill, SB 90, the voter suppression bill, and SB 1890, the unconstitutional anti-free speech constitutional amendment bill. All of these bills are racist and rooted in maintaining the systemic white supremacist power structure that only benefits leadership and dominates Florida and our country. For example, Governor DeSantis made his wishes for House Bill 1 known as a response to the peaceful Black Lives Matter movement last summer. HB 1 criminalizes protest and creates new ambiguous laws that leave our First Amendment rights at the whim of police officers across the state. SB 90, the voter suppression bill, makes it harder to engage with vote by mail, which, as we know, was remarkably popular and successful in Florida in the 2020 election. On top of it is that in Florida in 2020, from an administrative point of view, had really a wonderful election in that results were timely. People felt like they could get their voices heard, and clearly so many people voted. It was just remarkable to see that turnout. So we believe very strongly that any barrier to voting is unacceptable, especially those that impact communities of color that have been historically disenfranchised. SB 1890 puts a financial limit on the petition gathering portion of a constitutional amendment campaign. Due to the lack of a statutory citizen initiative process in Florida, the constitutional amendment process has become the way that residents like us on this call can enact change when the legislature is unable or unwilling to act. The citizens initiative process is a right that is guaranteed to every Floridian in the Florida Constitution. SB 1890 only makes this process more difficult, which is not only wrong in Florida, but it's also wrong in the USA, as the US Supreme Court has routinely ruled that campaign finance limits on initiative campaigns are limits on free speech, which is unconstitutional. Do not forget that this bill comes after 2 previous sessions of additional attacks on citizens' initiatives, which means we've seen 3 straight years of attacks, making it harder for citizens to act on their constitutional right. What happened 3 years ago? The people of Florida approved the Rights Restoration Amendment, which returned the right to vote to formerly incarcerated people. So in closing, thank you to the many activists and residents that made their voices heard on these 3 bills. Unfortunately, Governor DeSantis has already signed them into law, but not without immediate legal challenges. So please stay tuned. More is coming. This is not the end of the game here. Keep watching and paying attention. There may be more opportunities for you to engage in the future. Certainly, it's our jobs on the seat at the table to make sure that everyone in Florida knows exactly how these bills came to me, what came to be, what they're going to do, and how they're going to impact the future of our state going forward. So thank you so much. Up next, we have Jessica Lewis with the Sierra Club, who's going to talk about another democracy-related bill, SB 88, farming operations. Jessica.
Right. So Jonathan told us a bit about the direct attacks on democracy that we've seen in this session, and that is extremely unfortunate and really moves us backwards. But another thing that's happening is the legislature and our leadership is attacking our ability to pursue transparent processes. So SB 88 is known as the Right to Harm Bill. It basically is giving agriculture entities, large-scale corporations in Florida, the ability to harm people's health. And the state is saying that citizens, Floridians, are not able to hold those agriculture entities accountable. We are now not able to sue when our health is harmed, and we can only sue if our property is harmed. If you don't own property, if you are a renter, or perhaps you have a very low income situation, you don't have a big house, you can only sue for the damage done to your property and not for the damage done to your health. So we've seen these direct attacks on democracy. Now we're seeing direct attacks on the processes that Floridians that humans in Florida can use to try to claw back some of our right to clean air, to clean water. So this is just yet another way that we are seeing an attack on our democracy, an attack on the power of Floridians. I'm not going to go into the details of SB 88 because it's a little wonky and technical, but what I do want people to understand is that we should be able to pursue justice through the courts. And apparently the leadership, that's my computer yelling at me, sorry. Apparently the leadership in our state disagrees that we should have that right to pursue damages done to our health in court. And that is just really unfortunate. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. Back to you, Zach.
Thank you so much. And so finally, we're going to end this bad bills section with Ida Escamani, who represents Florida Rising, to talk a little bit about the ways in which the legislature shifted the tax burden onto lower income people this year. Ida, take it away.
Thank you, Zach. So we just heard about an assault on our democracy and our representation. Now I'm here to talk to you about taxation. So what we saw in the Florida legislature, we believe that a people's budget that should put the people's demands over corporate donors. And we've seen along these long list of bad energy bills, a constant theme of putting the corporate interests above the people. We saw that in our budget as well. The legislature passed over $100 billion budget, one of the biggest ever in the history of this state, in big credit to President Biden's American Rescue Plan, which provided an additional $10 billion to the state to help balance the budget and to face the downfall of our economy from this pandemic, right? And so where's this money going though? We saw many opportunities to center climate resiliency, to build a green economy, to center directly impacted people. But instead what the legislature did is they actually passed a new sales tax collection on us. And they've redirected that revenue not to essential services, but to businesses in a form of a tax break. So essentially they're taxing us, they're collecting a new sales tax on everyday people, and they are taking that revenue and giving it away to businesses in this state in a form of another tax break. It's important to note that in Florida, we have massive corporate tax loopholes. This bill, Senate Bill 50, essentially closed a consumer tax loophole and then took that money and gave it back to businesses so that they'd pay less of their taxes. And fairness is a fundamental value in this country. And quite frankly, we pay our fair share, corporations should pay theirs as well. And there's so many countless things, these dollars, billions in revenue, $1 billion every year, and it's only gonna get bigger because this is in relation to online sales tax. These dollars could go towards essential services. They could go towards a lot of the good bills we just talked about, but instead, again, it's going off the tax breaks. And so this is just more and more of a theme of this state, really in the last decades, of shifting the tax burden to everyday people away from the wealthy and away from corporations. And of course, these are a lot of the entities that are donating to lawmakers to have them do their bidding, to pass laws to make them more money, right? And so there's a very prevalent theme here, and Some of the other pieces that the legislature did reject, they did not fix unemployment reform benefits. They rejected the utility relief fund. They rejected checks to all essential workers. They rejected using these billions of dollars towards a small business relief grants. Again, as my colleague already noted, they cut affordable housing by over 50% in this state. They failed to expand Medicaid. And like I said earlier, they left corporate tax loopholes wide open in this state. 99% of businesses already don't pay a corporate income tax in Florida, and the corporate income tax rate is currently reduced from 5.5% to 4.5%. So I could go on and on and on with my tax talk, but the point is the legislature in our budget as well has reflected a disregard for everyday people in favor of special interest, and it's why that your voices are so important in this process. And if you notice that you're paying more in taxes, you should be a little mad about it because it's not going back towards you, it's going back towards business tax breaks. And I'll toss it back to you, Zach.
Thank you so much, Ida. I've heard said that a budget is a statement of values, and it makes you wonder what values our legislature has of the budget that they put forward. And so finally, we're going to move on to highlighting some of our legislative champions who have fought really hard and really well and with some success in, like I said before, a really toxic and difficult environment. And so I'm going to pass it on to Jonathan Weber once again, to highlight some of the legislators who made this, really made us proud this year.
Yes, Zach, thank you. And I really do wish that we had some music keyed up here or something like that, like Eye of the Tiger, I don't know, or something really, really like to get us going, because this is really a wonderful part of the night where we can kind of highlight and single out some of the legislators that really spoke and took action that really, I think, was above and beyond what normally happens at the legislature on issues that we all care about at the SEPA table. The first slide we have up here, of course, is Representative Anna Eskamani, Democrat from Orlando, Senator Lori Berman, Democrat from Boynton Beach. Both of these legislators are not only the sponsor of our wonderful renewable portfolio standards bill that was mentioned earlier, but they've also actively participated on discussion on some of the bad bills that passed. Both these legislators made it a point to ask the sponsor some really important questions and provide some great testimony in debate about what this bill will actually do to the people of Florida and to our local communities. So hats off to them. Thank you so much. Go to the next slide. Next up, we have Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, Democrat from Winter Park, and Senator Chevron Jones, Democrat from Miami Gardens. His district actually also goes up into Broward, I think just a little bit. So for Broward and Miami-Dade folks. So both of these legislators are, again, they are sponsors of the utility relief bill, which was an amazing effort to possibly provide some relief to those who are impacted from the COVID-19 pandemic, to possibly do something as basic as keep the lights on during this kind of terrible over a year now that it's been. I really can't say enough thank yous to Representative Smith for his constant, really smart debate and questions on almost every single bill that matters to the SEPA table. It's just remarkable. I don't know where he gets it from. I mean, I just don't know, but he's able to articulate a point perfectly, succinctly, and seemingly at the command like that. So thank you so much to him. And of course, Senator Jones over in the Senate, it was just about there. The same with Representative Smith and his ability to speak up for the issues that matter. Next slide. So I'm extremely proud to highlight Representative Yvonne Hinson today. Representative Hinson is brand new. She's a new elected official to the House of Representatives, and you kind of never know what you're going to get when you get a new member in the House. It's kind of like, are they going to play it cool that first year? Are they going to like speak up? You never really know. Representative Hinson, I'll tell you, just kind of grabbed this year by the horns and wrestled it as much as she could, and really made a remarkable case for how these bills harm Florida. And certainly, I think she's probably also the most gifable new member that exists this year. She offered some really great moments where she spoke up for the people of Florida and really highlighting how these bills are and how the regressive taxes are going to impact working Floridians. One below, Representative Joy Goff-Marcil from the Orlando area, Maitland. She, again, is not someone who has participated a ton in the past, but this year she really decided to take on some of these clean energy issues as her own. And I couldn't be more delighted to see her, again, provide remarkably smart testimony and debate, ask some really pointed questions to bill sponsors about bills, specifically on House Bill 896, which was the solar siting bill. and on House Bill 919. Both Rep. Hinson and Joy Goff-Marcil, both of them really, I think, did a wonderful job articulating the problems with those bills and highlighting this for all of posterity for the rest of time. It'll be on the record for that. So that was fantastic. Next page. Senator Gary Farmer, who would have been my senator if I was living back home in Broward, where I was originally from. Senator Farmer, again, he is a leader inside the Senate and made sure, if it wasn't for him, you know, who knows what would have happened on Senate Bill 896. Although that bill did pass, that's the solar siting bill, Senator Farmer was able to get that amendment added at the last minute. The very last minute is actually a late filed amendment, and because of his sheer will of force, he was able to get that through and add it to the bill, which carved out part of Alachua County there on the solar siting bill, which is fantastic. And thank you to Senator Farmer for your efforts there. We rely on you every year, and hopefully we can rely on you again going forwards. Thank you so much. Representative Ben Diamond is just, I mean, everyone's friend, Representative Ben Diamond. Him and his office, him and his staff person, they've always been there whenever we had a question or had a problem or a need or didn't understand something. Representative Ben Diamond and his staff have been gone over the top to help every single one of us on the seat at the table call. And again, when we need good testimony, when we need a question asked, or if Representative Diamond is able to provide good debate in committee or on the floor of the House, we can always count on Rep. Diamond to do the right thing. And this year was no different. We can just kind of keep this slide ready to go for the future because Rep. Diamond's always going to be on there. And the last slide here we have is Representative Dottie Joseph from Miami. She represents part of Miami that is going to be that is being directly impacted by the changing climate and rising seas. Representative Joseph, again, is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. I'll tell you that right now. And she did an amazing thing this year in committee on House Bill I believe it was 919 in the House. She offered a remarkable set of questions and debate to really ask the sponsor about what the impacts of this bill will be. So I really can't thank her enough for taking on an issue that I'm not sure she's worked on before and making it her own and really speaking to the people of Florida on that. And last on our list is another new freshman member, which I'm sure many of you probably heard about already because he has done an excellent job making a name for himself. Representative Omari Hardy from Mangonia Park. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's the Lake Worth area in northern Palm Beach County. Representative Omari Hardy, again, too many times to even count. I think I lost track how many times he made some of the most impassioned pleas on either on the floor of the House or in committee, speaking on issues that really matter and impact Floridians on all of the bad bills that we mentioned. If they went by Omari Hardy, he made a comment on it, guaranteed. You can go back and watch the videotape if you need to, because he was on top of it. And again, hats off to him. And thank you so much, Representative Hardy, for your leadership. And again, your first year in office, and you just dove right in. And I love to see that from new members. That's just exciting for us here at the seat at the table. So thank you so much. Hopefully next year we can have all of these and more next year.
Thank you so much, John. And so we're going to close out. You know, we don't want to be so doom and gloom. There's been a lot of bad things that happened in legislative session this year, but there's a lot of next steps and a lot of opportunities to really advocate on behalf of yourself, your community, your environment. They're going to be coming up real soon. So we're going to start with we'll go with local and move on to federal. And we're going to start with the local. And so I'm going to pass it back on to Maria Revellas to talk about some of the opportunities that are coming up.
Yes, there are opportunities coming up. Thank you. There are opportunities coming up. I'm going to start with opportunities around the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan, it's going to distribute hundreds of millions of dollars to county and municipal governments across the state of Florida. The first round of distributions will be by May 11, 21. So it's going to start today. The second round will be within 12 months, and money should be used by December 31st, 24. And the acceptable uses are going to be public health, COVID response, government services, water, sewer or broadband infrastructure, and premium pay for essential workers, both public and private, through grants. So we know that COVID-19 has deepened the economic inequality for communities of color that already face systematic disadvantages in energy costs, stable energy supply, access to renewable energy resources, energy efficient technology, and all the benefits of a clean energy economy. The funding in the American Rescue Plan is intended to help low-income families afford home heating and cooling costs and meet unpaid electric and natural gas bills. So that's going to be direct relief to families in Florida. And these funds will also help families make cost-effective home energy repairs. So locally, at a local level, we're going to need to advocate at the local level to ensure that these funds are used to advance equity, justice, and systemic problems like high utility bills, which contribute to the disconnection issues to be far worse than what it should have been otherwise. We know that addressing these disparities is an important part of achieving racial justice. So we have some work to do, Zach.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to pass it on to Susan Glickman to talk about the state opportunities that are coming up.
Great. As you mentioned, there are a number of venues where activities happen, and we were just talking about some great opportunities at the local level. So at the state level, we have the Florida Public Service Commission, which is where our utilities are regulated. The three big investor-owned utilities, Tampa Electric, Duke Energy, and Florida Power and Light, they're called investor-owned utilities. They cover 75% of the state. And so they are regulated at the Public Service Commission. And every 5 years, as you can see up on the screen, we're talking about the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which also includes two of the larger municipal electric companies, which is the Jacksonville Electric Authority, JEA, and the Orlando Utility Commission, OUC. So we set conservation goals every 5 years, and Florida's not doing a very good job at that, surprise, surprise. And it's important because there's the connection between setting conservation goals and the next thing that I will speak to, which is the rate increases. So just think about this for a minute. We don't offer good energy efficiency programs. Out of 50 utilities nationwide, Tampa Electric Company is 46, Duke Energy is 48, and Florida Power and Light, which is the biggest utility in Florida, is 51 out of 52. This is really important because it's an equity issue. Affluent people are getting more efficient every day. So it's super important that we offer energy efficiency programs because people who have lower incomes tend to pay what's known as a high energy burden. It's a higher, disproportionately higher percentage of their income toward their energy bills. So we're in a rulemaking now, and they're looking at the rules surrounding this process. And we use an antiquated cost benefit test that really doesn't make sense anymore. We are the only state to use it. So we need to make our voices heard. So very quickly, your homework assignment for today is to go to energysmartfl.com, energysmartfl.com, and join the roughly 7,000 people who have weighed in to let the Florida Public Service Commission know that we need to modernize this ridiculous cost benefit test where they eliminate all the low cost measures. And really it's, the big utilities make money by building power plants. So they don't inherently want to help people use less energy, and they don't want to capture all this cost-effective efficiency because it may make it harder for them to build these new power plants. So, and what happens when you build a new power plant? That makes your rates go up. So the next thing I want to mention is that all three investor-owned utilities have lined up for rate increases, right? So we don't offer efficiency. People have high energy burdens. There are enormous a number of people at risk of being disconnected, and Zach Costner tracks this and he can speak more to that. And now all the utilities are coming in for rate increases, right? So it's just about perfect. And your rates, your power bill goes up when we build these new power plants. So that's why it's doubly important that we capture all the cost-effective efficiency. Duke Energy has just actually had their rate increase approved. Tampa Electric is coming in for a couple $100 million more along the same line as Duke, but Florida Power and Light is in the billions of dollars. So people need to get plugged in and make sure that if there are any number of groups, the Clio Institute, Volt Solar, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the Sierra Club, and on, just make sure you're plugged in and let your voice be heard. So EnergySmartFL.com, it'll take you about a minute or two. You can either send a letter or download a poster and take a selfie of yourself and upload that, but you've got to let your voice be heard because it's just too important. So thanks very much, Zach, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Susan. Just building on that briefly, tomorrow at 6 o'clock p.m., I believe, there will be a presentation, similar webinar to this one, being put on by multiple CEFA partners through the Miami Climate Alliance that will be going into detail on the FPL rate case. So if you want to hear more about that, that'd be a great event to tune into. Finally, we're going to move on to the federal level. And so we're going to have Melissa Baldwin take it away to talk a little bit about what the opportunities are there.
Thank you, everyone. Well, they say that when one door closes, another window opens. And when the door closes on state policy, sometimes we have a window open on federal policy. And even though Florida doesn't have a clean renewable energy standard, there is an opportunity to pass a federal clean energy standard. A clean energy standard is just a set goal, a specific % of clean renewable energy. And President Biden has put a clean energy standard into his $2.2 trillion infrastructure spending plan. The goal is to have 80% clean electricity by 2030. And there's a broad national coalition of groups who are pushing for an even stronger federal clean energy standard. The path forward on this is not totally clear yet, but we need all Democrats on board, and we might have to pass the bill through a budget reconciliation process. We really just need all hands on deck to push our federal lawmakers to let them know you support clean energy, you want to see a clean energy standard. And what you can do is follow the groups in this coalition. We will be putting out calls to action in the future as this opportunity develops, and we hope that you'll get excited and help to push for this federal legislation, and maybe that can help push Florida ahead since we're behind in so many other things as the other speakers talked about. So I will pass it now to Gianna, who will speak about another policy.
I'm not Gianna. Gianna, I think, is frozen on the Zoom, but I do have her remarks. She just texted me. And Gianna, if you do come back on, please welcome to hop in. But in her words, there's a lot of demoralizing news at the state level, but there are exciting proposals on the federal level we'll keep an eye on, just as we just heard. The American Jobs Plan is built around climate action. There are proposals to invest in clean energy with goal setting to move towards 100% clean, renewable energy by 2035, which is our bill we filed in the Florida legislature. And this means that the electrification of vehicles and buildings, investments in equity and justice, reducing carbon emissions and creating good paying jobs could be in our future if we take via the President Biden, and local governments will benefit immensely from these funds in order to create more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future. So we have to keep up the fight. And Gianna, we appreciate those remarks.
Thank you so much. And so with that, I'm going to end the PowerPoint. But Ida, if you want to close us out with some final words of inspiration.
Totally, Zach. That's very kind. And Gianna sort of opened it up already for me. You know, it's very easy to fall into a hopeless despair after this legislative session. Much of this presentation was around really good ideas that didn't move forward and really bad ideas that were passed. What I know is for sure is that we fought tirelessly every step of the way on every bill, every committee. We spoke with every single lawmaker. Our voices were definitely heard against all odds and facing countless roadblocks. We made sure of that. Yet still, the majority of those elected to serve us voted against us, against the safety and prosperity of our communities and their own constituents, against a clean energy economy, against fairness, and yes, still against science. And in favor of what? To serve whom? As you saw from this presentation, so often the bills that pass serve the interests of the oil and gas industry, monopoly utility companies like TECO and Florida Power and Light. They were determined to stick to the status quo. In the midst of a climate emergency, a global pandemic, a reckoning on race, the Florida legislature decided to stick with the status quo when we had opportunities to really transform the state. And as I was stated previously as well, these were not always party line votes, y'all. Partisanship talks a big game in the state capitol, but corporate donors speak even louder. And we saw many Democrats who voted with corporate interest. And also we saw way too many Republicans continuing to deny science and push an agenda forward to strip away our rights and our power. And all of this, of course, would make you feel a lot of despair. And why is all this happening? And to me, the answer is simple. It's because we are winning. As we gain more momentum and more power and progress to course correct this state and nation, the fights will get harder here in Florida. The losses will be harder to overcome. The rules will continue to be rigged against us. But it's because those crowns are falling from heads unworthy, and we, the people, are gaining control. And so what we must do right now is double down, center our communities, lift up climate champions like Jonathan Weber did, hold account those who sided with special interests over our collective futures. The opposition is counting on us to give up and surrender, but I know we will not. We will pick up ourselves off the ground. We will wipe the dirt off our pants and our shoulders, and we keep up the good fight. And I'm just so grateful to do that with the folks watching and the folks that we've shared this panel with, y'all. I know it doesn't feel like it, but the fights will get harder the more close we are to victory. And so just keep it up. Do not stop. Have your voices heard. And we're very grateful for all of you. And I'll toss it back to you, Zach.
Thank you so much, Ida. And thank you everybody who attended and listened in. We're gonna need people power as we move forward. And we really appreciate everybody who is interested in learning more about their civic environment and how they can make a difference. Anybody who is interested in joining the CIFA table, joining us or where we meet and discussing plans for how to chart a course to a just transition to renewable energy, welcome to join us. Send me an email at zcosner@fcvoters.org and we'll add you to the list. And with that, I think we're going to close out today's session. Thank you everybody once again for attending, for listening, and thank you to all of our participants and our panelists who made it a great event.